Well, it's time for the Apple Orchard Story, Chapter 2. For those of you who are regular followers of our little corner on Hometown Cable, you may already have seen Chapter 1, the Forrence Orchard Story, which we did some weeks ago when the apple season here in Clinton County was winding down. It's after the fact now, the leaves are turning, most are falling, and my lawn has about 2 feet of leaves that should be taken away. And we thought we would cover another aspect of the business today. So we have stopped on Route 22 south of Peru at the apple sales and service in the packing plant for Forrence Orchards. And I have another one of the famous triumvirate here with me. Peter Forrence, how are you, buddy?
Fine. Nice to be here.
It's nice to be alive at my age. We had a little rain after Halloween, and now we're just standing here and there's just a bare drizzle in the air. And it's a good day to be alive.
Yeah, it's great. It's beautiful. I mean, it'd be a great day to be deer hunting.
Oh, is that where you'd like to be, huh?
Wouldn't mind, actually, yeah.
I guess that's where a lot of our friends and neighbors are at this time. And since I don't hunt, I rely on them for those nice venison steaks and the venison jerky and the Slim Jims and all the other stuff. We're going to talk about your side of the business here because it's such an important side. We spent over an hour driving through the orchards, talking with Mason, talking with the Jamaican workers, getting a general idea how the apple business, principally the Macintosh business, but in general the apple business has evolved over the years. Since I moved here in 1961, and in those days we talked before about how many local people came and picked apples during the season. Now it's mostly Jamaicans who come here, and we interviewed people who've been here for 25, 26, 27 years. So the business has changed. You were born and brought up in the business, right?
I was born and brought up in the business, but actually I didn't come back to the business until about 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh no, tell me about that.
Right, well prior to that I worked in New York. I went to school in New Jersey and ended up ultimately working in New York on Wall Street for 20 years. And then the lure of the North Country and the slower pace, brought me back to the family business. And I handle a different side of the business than you saw in your previous hour. It's the marketing, the storage, the marketing, and the packing of the product.
Where did you go to school?
I went to school in a little school in New Jersey called Princeton.
We love to drop names on this program.
Well, I don't ever say it quite as loud and as boldly as some others who've been there do. But my cousins all went to Cornell, so we have this little. In fact, if you notice the sports scores, this past weekend Princeton beat Cornell. I don't know, 20-6. I think it was.
I know, but they don't know a thing about Macintosh apples.
Not a thing. They don't at Princeton either.
So what did you study at Princeton?
I was an economics major.
Well, that makes perfect sense.
Well, I guess. I mean, the theory of economics, actually, when you follow the apple business and kind of the apple markets, there's a lot that's applicable. I mean, it just simply comes down to a supply and demand situation. The years there are big crops, we're in one right now. The product's much more difficult to sell. Prices are significantly lower than they are with small crops. And, it's a real battle to sell them all. As good as the product may be, and this year, in fact, is a classic.
Special. Fantastic.
Well, this year,
as good as it's ever been.
This year, the quality of the fruit is as good as I've seen it in my short career. But again, it's a supply and demand situation. There was perfect weather conditions, which Mason probably told you about. The pollination was fine. The sizing's been great. The apple business, like probably most of agriculture, really becomes if you have normal North Country weather, which isn't the severe drought or the severe rain or whatever, just normal conditions through the spring, summer, and fall. Typically, we end up with a reasonably good crop. Last year, there were a host of different problems from the weather, and we had a very small crop, but the prices were significantly higher. So there's the trade-off every year, and you kind of go into each year not knowing which it's going to be until about this time.
It amazed me when they told me the story about the more apples there were, and they're bigger this year.
I know. The crop is spectacular this year.
And it's just, I had not thought of the supply and demand end of it, so that you're getting much less per box of apples than you would had you only had half the supply.
I know. Well, it's not. You got to remember that it's not just Forrence Orchards; it's the whole country.
Sure.
I mean, there's a big crop everywhere. There's a big crop in Michigan. There's a big crop in southern New York. The only place there isn't a big crop is in the state of Washington, which is the big dominant apple producer in the country. But we more compete with the southern part of New York and, to a certain extent, the state of Michigan. They have a massive crop in the state of Michigan.
They do.
Yeah. And of course, everybody's coming off a small crop last year. So you go from a situation where a lot of the marketing channels dried up completely because there wasn't enough fruit last year, to a situation where now we have just, I wouldn't call it a glut of apples, but there certainly are plenty of apples, and you have to figure out ways to sell them that might be a little different than it would in a normal year.
You'll use a little ingenuity, huh?
Well, yeah, it's not actually so much right at this facility the ingenuity takes place, but it's at the places where they're selling to the chain stores. The chain stores are the big takers of our product.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, there are a whole host of them, and people who follow the business side of it realize that chain stores are consolidating. The one big chain store is kind of driving everybody to business practices that they wouldn't have maybe done without that influence, and it's just become a difficult arena. Shelf space is what everybody fights for. When you walk into a grocery store, you don't think about it so much, but as an example, if you walk into Price Chopper in Plattsburgh, the shelf space for bagged apples is half this year what it was last year. It's been replaced. The half that's not there this year has been replaced with citrus.
Come on.
Absolutely.
So who would notice that?
Absolutely.
See, I would have no clue unless you told me.
Shelf space becomes the whole thing, because as the woman pushes her little cart along, half of what she's looking at is apples and half is oranges and grapefruit.
What's the reason for that?
Well, it's generally pretty convoluted, but a lot of it has to do with it's all computerized, and it's all a function of, number one, where they can buy the product, how cheaply they can buy the product, as well as how much pressure is on them to handle more of each of these products. Citrus has a big lobby. They're well organized in from the marketing side. So maybe they keep citrus for an extra week versus switching completely over to apples. And when you consider all the chain stores in the country, that influence of having half as many apples on the shelf as you would have had maybe the previous year or the previous year. There's a big influence in the demand for our product and the volume that we can sell on any given week.
And that would be true of all the other chains as well as Price Chopper?
Well, I don't know that all the others have cut theirs in half, but all the other chains have people fighting for shelf space within their stores.
And the location of the shelves themselves. I understand there's a philosophy about where the product goes. Absolutely. High and low and at the end of the aisles. And
well, if you walk into Hannaford in Plattsburgh, what's the first shelf you see? The apple shelf. Generally, they put the most profitable products for them. You're walking in with your car, you got nothing in it.
What a revelation. I never would have even thought about these things.
Listen, I'm sure
I'm normally one step behind Kay, and she's leading me.
I'm sure there'll be supermarket executives who might see this who will know a heck of a lot more than I do about it. But the whole science of supermarket, placement and where everything goes, it's a huge, huge business. All this subliminal stuff that makes you buy or not buy any given product.
That's where your marketing degree comes in handy. I imagine there was a little wheeling. Oh, it was an economics degree. Wheeling and dealing to get you back home here. They're delighted to have you back in Peru, I can imagine.
Well,
so you moved up here, lock, stock, and barrel. Where did you live? Right in Manhattan?
I did for a while. For about half of the 20 years, I lived in Manhattan and
oh, wow.
New Jersey.
What a different life.
It's a little different, yeah. Although I came up a lot, so it wasn't like I'd forgotten about the North Country. But yeah, it is a different life.
Now that you're here, are you happy you made the move? And
Yes.
you can be brutally honest if you want to.
Sure. No, I'm happy. I made the move 5 or 6 years ago, and
Yeah.
Wall Street has had its ups and downs since.
That's
As
an
everybody
understatement,
knows, yeah.
a gross understatement.
I left on the ups, but it's a tough arena down there too. It's not exactly a walk in the park. But I enjoy the apple business. It's kind of new every year, as I think I critiqued earlier. The crop size, quality of the crop. I mean, there are a host of different influences that become what dominates your thought process any given day.
One of the most interesting things about this program for me is that I get a liberal education every time Calvin turns the camera on. You start out being blissfully ignorant about most subjects in the world. You meet intelligent people such as Peter here, and you do get an education. And fortunately, that's one of the good things about this program. People can sit down and learn a little bit about the inside-out operation of the apple business in the North Country. It surrounds us everywhere. This is apple country. This is Macintosh country. Yeah, it's not the biggest apple producing state in the nation, but we're pretty proud of what we have here, and the Macs and all the other kinds of apples. But the fact is, I had no idea about how the stores set up their shelving. I have no idea how you market apples. I have no idea how cold storage and packing works. All I know is you got a lot of apples hanging around here this year, and you got to find something to do with them.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you just work your way through them, and as I told you earlier, there are a lot of different avenues to use, and believe me, I'm spending as much time as I can trying to figure it out.
Obviously, being in the radio business here for all those years, I had occasion to interview apple growers over and over and over again, but it was generally, what kind of a crop did you have this year? What real damage did the hail do? And hail is awful for apple trees. And then there was a thing called alar, which was used for many, many years for a lot of reasons. And when that was banned, there were a lot of adjustments that had to be made, right? Some years back?
Yeah, there were. I wasn't in the business then, but I was aware of it all, most of it. And did Mason go over it all with you?
He went over it briefly.
Right. Well, it was a Macintosh. It was an influence that really affected the Macintosh business because it made Macintosh much more difficult to grow, kind of all over, especially in the south of the southern part of the state. We benefited from it in that we could continue to grow Macintosh successfully and store them successfully through, what our season is, which is usually generally in the middle of June. But it becomes a long, kind of involved story. The fact is, it's gone. There are some compounds that have come out that have been approved by all the various authorities that they don't have the same influence as alar, but they help a lot in the harvest process. They keep the apples on the tree. The big foe is warm weather in the fall that mature the apples too quickly, and they drop off the tree and end up, going from a fresh product to a juice product on the ground. And that is a phenomena that we fight continually from about mid-August on. You got to get them off the trees. They have to be red enough. They've got to be big enough. I mean, there's a whole host of different problems.
There's real science to it.
Well, the boys outside deal with it more than I do, but, once they're done with them, then I take over and try to, and actually I have a lot of help from Mason's son, Seth, who actually handles most of the storage issues. But, together we try to keep it all going.
Just before we step inside and look over this amazing operation, because few of our viewers have ever been inside this building, I want to talk just for one moment about this family relationship. This is, in the North Country, we're so fortunate to have many family businesses. 3 and 4 generations in the same business. Now, you talked about Seth. So you're going several generations in the Forrence apple business here. The size of this operation, I want to know how the real business decisions get made. How do you, the 3 of you, plus other family members, coordinate your efforts? Do you have regular board meetings, or how does that work?
Well, we have meetings regularly, more in the summer and in the winter when everybody isn't under the gun.
Yeah.
But first of all, the process of growing apples and storing apples and packing apples is not a process that is, changing as far as the function goes. It doesn't change year to year. I mean, we all know how the process works, so we don't have to get involved in deciding whether we're packing today or not packing today. Some of the little intricacies do change a little, but generally speaking, each person who's responsible for whatever they're responsible for makes those decisions. Now, they might consult the other person, but I mean, I don't know much about the out of door from the standpoint of making a decision about whether we should thin heavy or light or spray for this or spray for that. I mean, I just don't know anything about it, or I know little about it. And the same goes the other way. I mean, the guys on the outside are pretty busy on an ongoing basis, and we are on, in the storing and packing of the product. So, yes, we stay in touch. We probably don't stay in touch as much as we should, but on the other hand, we're each confident that the other person is making the proper decision for his particular expertise.
And you have to collaborate, and it's all part of a big machine, so they all have to work together.
Right. But
it's just something Calvin and I were wondering about. How does, do we sometimes go in the orchard and duke it out? How do we come to some of these
No,
decisions?
we come in here and duke it out. We don't really, we never go to the other guy's turf, right?
They throw apples.
No, we listen. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to duke much out because it's a very volatile business. Agriculture generally is a volatile business. So, if you're confident that the other person, the other sides of the business are doing the best job they can, I mean, what's there to duke it out about? I mean, it's like any other business. I mean, we all work from 7 to 4:30 or 7. I mean, we're working as long as we can, and we're working trying to make the right decisions, and there really doesn't become a lot to duke it out about.
Just so busy.
It's so busy, and it's as much managing the people under you as anything else.
Yeah. We talked before we go inside. This is a part of the orchard over here. There are many parts across the street. This, like many area farmers, have had to grow to remain viable and successful in this area. And goodness knows what the upper limits are, but we know people with over 1,000 cows these days. This orchard has grown immeasurably over the years, and it keeps adding real estate and adding real estate. I don't know if there is an ultimate goal, or if you just do what you have to do.
Well, those are questions that are kind of tough to answer. I mean, the apple business as a business, nationally is not a very good business, or has not been in the last.
Now he tells me.
10 or 15 years, it's been a very, very, very tough business. I mean, I think the difficulties have been pretty well documented with the cheap concentrate coming from China. All the different issues, the labor issues. I mean, it goes on, and the weather conditions and so forth. So it's not, there is no noted long-term plan. I mean, we have about 1,200 acres or so. I mean, the big mission right now here is to get the big trees down and get the smaller trees in place to produce the fruit.
We understood that. That's a big change over the last 40 years.
But the problem is the cost of producing a box of apples is what you really have to focus on. And big trees are very expensive. They're expensive to prune. They're expensive to pick. They're expensive to just generally maintain. So, you just can't afford it. The price of the product is about unchanged from, again, it varies from year to year, but on average, the price of the product is unchanged from about 10 or 15 years ago. Maybe even 20.
Come on.
Now, you know what expenses have done.
This is what farmers are saying about the price of milk.
That's right. It's the same concept. You just have to be as efficient as you possibly can. Or you won't be around like a lot of our associates.
True.
I mean, it's just been a business that's been tough. There's been a lot of apple orchards sold or developed. See, a lot of the apple orchards in the southern part of the state just have gone out of business. I mean, they've developed into homes, building lots and all that kind of stuff. That's what the pressure on those people is from. I mean, the pressure is from the bad economics of the business, but they can sell. They got 500 acres. They can sell it for a big building lot and or development or whatever it takes.
And
Sure.
Meanwhile, when some of these smaller orchards go out of business here in Clinton County, Forrence Orchards tax it on.
We have, but I think you can find those days over.
Really? That's done, huh? You don't think it'll be much more than 1,200 acres at some point? Because it's stretched out. How far are we talking about? 15 square miles or farther?
Well, probably 15 miles maybe from Harkness down to Valcour. That is the diagonal that's the longest. I don't know. Who knows? It really becomes day to day.
But part of your job as the marketing economics expert is to say, my God, we're in deep trouble next year. We can't be adding this.
Right. The problem is when you have 1,200 acres and all the acres produce a fabulous, magnificent crop, we have more apples than we are able to handle without the price. Because if we have it, likely everybody else has it. Hence, you have a situation where the channels just are not strong enough to take increased volume without a significant reduction in price. Economics, right?
Supply and demand.
You got it.
Let's go inside and look around.
Sure.
What do you say?
Please, let's go.
We moved to the back of the packing facility here on Route 22, south of Plattsburgh. We're talking with Peter Forrence and getting a great education about the apple business. We passed one of the patriarchs of the business on the way in. Let's talk about your dad. What's his name, first of all?
Bill Forrence.
And he's been he worked with this business for a long time.
Right, he's 79 and
these guys are amazing.
I know. He started from day one, whenever that day was. So he's been here with his brother Roger and kind of pounding it out in the apple business.
We were amazed. Of course, I've known Roger for a long time, and our mutual connection with the recent and now defunct Plattsburgh Air Force Base, but both of us spent an awful lot of time promoting that mission here. And to think about, let me see, Roger's 85 now.
85, I think it's the number, right?
And we watched him loading people onto his truck, and we remember his old truck with the floorboards hanging out of it and taking people around. But maybe just getting out and about is a pretty healthy operation. Looking at your dad, he looks like he could.
I know. It is amazing. It makes you wonder if maybe the apples don't have some influence, some.
We don't mind saying that.
Well,
I think
you'd
that's
like
great.
to say it and have it mean something, but it is amazing. Roger's out and about all the time, and he stayed very young for a guy 85 years old. My father's not far behind him, and he's here every day. They both go to Florida for a little in the winter, but they're here every day.
Maybe they paid their dues. What do you think?
I would say so. I think a lot of it has to do with keeping their mind busy. I mean, my father's involved in, all the little issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. We kind of bounce them off him, and I'm sure Mason does that with Roger as well. It keeps them active, and of course, the business really is a little bit old-fashioned in that a lot of the people who are in it have been in it forever. And it is not a business that has changed. It's not a cutting-edge type business.
Yeah.
It's a business. It's a traditional business, and a lot of the decisions that are made by people who, are old school types. So it's always good to kind of get a sense for what they think of issues within the business, so that you have some sense of either what you're missing, what you'd want to change, or what happens next.
I like to watch it operate. I like to see several generations working together is what I'm trying to say in a business like this. And I imagine there's a little tugging backwards and a little pulling forwards that has to take place. But, obviously you arrive at a consensus and you have a meeting of the minds because this is a very successful business. We're inside. Do you call this the packing facility, the storage?
Yes, this is the cold storage. It consists of a couple different sections. The section we just walked through is the packing house, which is where we'll probably go from here. The section we're standing in right now is more a loading dock area. I mean, in the fall, this is where the fruit arrives from the field to be moved into the controlled atmosphere rooms. And after the harvest is over, it acts as the place where we stage the fruit before it's loaded on trailer trucks and sent out.
Okay, so they would come right in through this door.
Well, in the fall, fruit comes in through this door. It's dropped on a skid, forklift like you see right there, take it off, and then it goes wherever we happen to want it to go. If you see the boxed fruit over against the wall, that fruit is all fruit that has been packed and is awaiting the arrival of a truck that is going to take it to its various destinations. Those happen to be going to Boston.
Boston, how we call them up and say, you guys know what you're in for?
Yeah, really.
Okay, so the whole operation occurs in this building then?
Everything happens right here, right.
Okay, so the apples come in first, then what?
Well, they come in first, and what happens is there, the orchard has so many different sections, and each of the sections have various types of trees, size trees, varieties. So when the fruit comes in out of the field, these forklift drivers really need to know where it's coming from, what it is variety-wise, what our plan is for fruit from that section. Some of it is stored what we call long-term, which would probably not be taken out of a CA room until February, March, April, May. Other fruit is short-term controlled atmosphere, which would probably be taken out of the controlled atmosphere rooms November, December, January. And then there's some that is not stored in controlled atmosphere at all, and that's just put in a cold room. So that's the first fruit that we pack through this machine. So, there's you almost need a traffic cop.
You mentioned putting apples to sleep and so on. Once again, the layman who crunches on an apple or enjoys a piece of apple pie doesn't stop to think that these trees up here don't produce apples all year long. They produce them for a certain number of months of the year, and then they've got to be somehow, as you said, placed into suspended animation so that they stay fresh longer. And that's, unless you talked about controlled atmosphere, nobody mentioned, that's not a general topic of conversation around the dinner table. Did you know where this apple's been?
Right.
So that's a great thing to come in here and learn about that.
Right. It's not as, some people kind of think about it and go, wait a minute, what's this all about? But the reality is all you're doing is controlling the atmosphere that the fruit is stored in. You're reducing the carbon dioxide and oxygen in the air so that the apple doesn't rot. And it respirates normally. You can keep fruit in controlled atmosphere from anywhere from 3 months to, you could conceivably keep it year round, but even in controlled atmosphere with Macintosh anyway, you have to be thinking about shorter rather than longer as per the calendar year, so to speak. It just gives us a little time so that we don't have to try to sell the whole crop in October, November.
But then all of a sudden it's next year and there's apples on those trees again, and you got to go through that cycle all over again.
Well, of course, it depends on how big the crop is. This year the crop's big, so again, you'll end up with fruit longer than we would have, as an example, last year. This year we have to pack apples faster, and it'll last much longer than it did last year, because last year we had a much smaller crop.
You're telling me things get pretty intense in here.
They do.
They do everywhere some days.
Right. Well, during harvest, things get a little, they can get a little confusing and, maybe even a little heated on the odd occasion. But generally speaking, it would only be because of logistics. It's not because of major business decisions. It just amounts to, deploying your labor, where it makes the most sense and picking the blocks that make the most sense. And, there's some coordination. Actually, that's where Seth has been very, very helpful to us. He's young, aggressive, got a lot of enthusiasm, and knowledge. He's worked in the cold storage for a couple of years, learned that facet of it, but schooled in the outside. He went to Cornell in the ag program, schooled in the horticulture part of it. So he really has been a tremendous asset from that standpoint.
We've mentioned Cornell several times here, and it's a fabulous asset to have here in New York State. Mm-hmm. A lot of states don't have such a prestigious institution, and how many of our people in this business and many other businesses connected with agriculture here started their careers right there at Cornell. It's wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's perfectly situated and perfectly suited for anybody who is thinking of agriculture at all. I mean, certainly the apple business, but generally agriculture. My son's at the Cornell Ag School right now.
Is he really?
Yep. Yep.
Well, that's wonderful. And I had a son that graduated from there some years ago, and he's now a very successful businessman in the Midwest. How many people work here in this facility right here?
About 30.
Are they
It varies
local,
a little.
Mostly local people?
Yeah, they're well, probably 4 or 5 of them are not local, but the rest are all local people.
You just try to get an idea of the general makeup of the workforce at Forrence Orchards. We know that we learned last time, and this blew me away, that as many as 250 Jamaicans I hired here. Some stay here year-round, something else I didn't know.
Right. That's, again, the bulk of the workforce is outside during the harvest process. During the off time in the cold storage, we have a very steady workforce of in and around 30. And again, they're all local people. So, yes, we do use Jamaicans for the out-of-door work, and there are some naturalized Jamaicans who work in the packing facility. But generally speaking, most of the people who work here are all local people. I mean, we have in fact, the fellow on that Toyota forklift who's just driving through the curtain has worked for us for, I think, 40 years.
Oh, you gotta be kidding.
I remember as a kid when he came here with, a big silver belt buckle and, cowboy boots on. And he's worked here ever since for my father, obviously, mainly. And, he's one of our key men.
That's great. All right, what other parts of the building? You told us the apples come in, you put them in the...
What you see going on right here, Gordy, is this is where the packing process starts. You see the apples are in the big bins. Those are 20 bushel bins. They are about to be dumped, we call it, in the grader. And the reason we use the term dumped is because they are floated out of those bins and enter into the grading process in kind of a slow, methodical method. And if we go in there, I can kind of show you piece by piece how it all works.
It's amazing. I don't know how he got that door open when he got there. Did somebody do that for him, or did he do it?
No, actually you have those things like you have with your garage door opener.
Oh, and that's just press a little button on the forklift.
Listen,
he had it timed exactly.
Although we're not on the cutting edge in many things, we are with the Overhead Door Corporation.
The frame of that forklift came within paper-thin distance of the top of that door it was going up, so that leads me to believe that he's done it before.
He has. Now, as an example, the bins that he just took out are bins that are going to go for processing. They're culls. They didn't make the grade to be packed in a box. They are going to go and be made into applesauce.
Oh, somebody picks them out as
yes,
it goes?
You'll
Okay.
see in the packing process that they are the result of what we don't want, let's call it, because they either have a blemish or they're too small or whatever the reason might be. They have been culled out, and sometimes those culls go for apple juice. Generally, they go in this area for applesauce process.
Do you guys make cider here, or just?
No, we've never been in the cider business. I can't exactly tell you why, other than the cider.
There's enough to do without being in the cider
that's part of it. That's part of it. But one of the big issues is the cider and the apple juice concentrate from China has really just made that too an extremely difficult business.
You mentioned that twice now because it is a really big factor, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, what happens is the whole pricing of the apple structure is predicated on what you can do with those cull apples. And, in other words, if you can sell the cull apple for $2 a box, then everything up the scale is priced off that. If you can sell them for $5 a box, then everything proceeds higher off that. And what's happened with the apple juice concentrate issue, it's come in so cheap that there was a point when you couldn't get rid of those culls, simply because the juice guys didn't want them. They just didn't want them because they were making the bulk of their product with apple juice concentrate from mainly China. Now, it comes from a bunch of places, but China was the big culprit in the process because they flooded the market, lowered the prices. There was a huge lawsuit on the whole topic, and it's kind of passé information now, but it has never really, that market has never really recovered from that influence.
Is there a big bidding war every year for you in the wintertime to decide where your apples are going to go the next summer and fall? How do you do that?
No, we don't sell very many apples direct to a chain store. We sell the bulk of our fruit through broker communities.
Okay.
So we have some established relationships with people who handle our fruit after we're done with it. In other words, those boxes, they go to some of the open markets. They go to some people who do distribute to chain stores. And it's pretty much an established system, one that my father basically organized. And again, it comes down to some relationships with people who, we're kind of in business with. I mean, when I was in New York, they tried to, the buzzword there, and I can't remember the word right now, but the buzz was to get strategic alliances with people. That was it, strategic alliance. Everyone was working on their
life is all about, Peter, in case you didn't know.
Well, that's what we kind of have with some people to distribute our fruit.
That's where it helps to have been in the business for so many years.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't have those, some of us call them contacts, those strategic alliances.
How about
you pick up the phone and say, hey,
right,
what's going on today?
Well, of course, the people on the other side need the apples to supply their customers. I mean, most chain stores in the East anyway handle McIntosh apples. So the question really becomes where they get them. Do they get them through our distributor or someone else's distributor or what? So, I mean, it is a staple apple in the apple arena. So we're just happy for that.
And there are new varieties of apples coming along every year. Mm-hmm. Cornell puts out their bulletins as to what success they've had over there in testing some of the new trees. And I know that Forrence Orchards sells a lot of McIntosh, but they also grow some very interesting older varieties besides McIntosh, and some kind of exciting new varieties that are coming along.
Right, they do. The whole varietal thing becomes a whole nother story, but McIntosh, Cortlands have always been a very good variety for us. Now, if you know the history of a Cortland, I'm going to say 15 or 20 years ago, Cortland was considered a dead variety. No one wanted Cortlands.
Guess what?
So everybody south of here pushed all their Cortlands out.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, due to the reduced supply, and also there continues to be kind of a steady demand as a cooking apple for Cortland. So the Cortland has become a pretty good apple for us. One of the apples that has been a big problem in the apple arena is the Empire apple. We don't grow very many Empires, fortunately, but the Empire was a variety that was an alternative to a McIntosh when people couldn't grow McIntosh due to the alar problems.
Yes.
The Empire was grown in Western New York, Southern New York, Michigan. I mean, it was a big moneymaker for about 5 or 6 years. And what happened was the Empire was a big export apple. They went to the UK a lot. Well, as the production increased, the prices continued to decline. They declined, and they continued to decline, and basically they've never recovered. The difference between an Empire and a McIntosh, really, the boiled down version is, the main difference is an Empire loses most of its flavor as it softens.
I didn't know that.
Right. It tends to get a little...
Apples 101 here.
Yeah, exactly. It tends to get a little vinegary. And, of course, when you're sending an apple to the UK, I mean, that's a 10-day trip on a boat. So often they get to the UK, they tend to get soft, and they lose their flavor. And they look terrible on the shelf. McIntosh can soften, but they taste the same from a flavor standpoint after they've softened as they do when they're harder. I mean, just a little distinction between the two, and the Empire has suffered from it. So
amazing, wonderful news.
And then there's a host of other varieties. The new hot variety for us is the Honeycrisp.
Tell me a little bit about that. I think Mason mentioned it, but I want to hear more.
The Honeycrisp is a variety that comes out of Minnesota. I forgot it's a cross between two varieties, and I can't remember off the top of my head what they are. It is best described by its logo of being explosively crisp.
Here we go.
It has
explosively crisp.
That's how they're trying to sell it. And believe it or not, it really is a magnificent. It has kind of a tangy, sweet flavor, which is just delightful. I mean, whenever you have people who have had a Honeycrisp, they love them and seek out more. And of course, prices of Honeycrisp are very high right now because there isn't much production. I'm sure that'll change with time.
Yeah, I'm sure it will too.
Although it's a hard variety to grow. I mean, it demands a lot of different things than any of these other varieties. I mean, as an example, they need to be stored in 38 to 40 degree rooms, which there's no other apple. All the rest are 32 to 34. You know, just that 4 or 5 degrees difference is a big deal. The Honeycrisp will tend to scald if it's kept in a cold room.
Wow, we're learning so many technical things today. What else can we look at?
Let's see, which is the best way to go? This way, I would say.
All right. All right, Calvin had a housewife's question. When you get the apples home from the store, what's the best way to store them at home?
Well, as with almost any piece of produce, you're better off to keep it in the refrigerator. I mean, it will last significantly longer in the refrigerator versus out on the shelf, like people want to try to put it in a fruit bowl out on the shelf. Well, that's fine, but if you leave it out there for any length of time, it deteriorates much faster than it would in the refrigerator. One of the things that they're breeding apples for now, or are trying to develop, is an apple that will last longer at room temperature. Now, that's so that the housewife can put them on a shelf, or excuse me, put them in a bowl in the middle of the table and leave them there and not have to refrigerate them. Well, with McIntosh apples, the more they're refrigerated, the longer they're going to last.
All right, that sounds simple enough.
Right.
We promise to do it from now on at my house.
Now,
all right, where are we now?
I've stopped you at this spot. This is where the apples first enter the grading process. If you notice, they're brushed, which maybe Calvin can get a look at. They're brushed as they go over a set of brushes right there, which takes off any of the loose impediments, or there is a film on the apple that is called the bloom. It's officially called the bloom. What most people think of it as is spray. Well, it's not really spray. If you never sprayed the apples, they'd still have this bloom on them. It's taken off over those brushes, and then the fruit comes in front of one or two people, and they cull out the fruit that obviously isn't going to make it into a box. I mean, it makes it a little cheaper so that you don't have to go through the whole process and ultimately throw it away at the end of the machine where we're going to go next.
Oh, I see. So she was pulling apples out. Okay. I couldn't tell the difference one from the other.
Okay. Oh, see that apple?
Yep.
You see that mark on it?
Right.
That apple really would not ever make it to a box. So rather than send it all the way through the system and have it waxed, labeled, and so forth, we get rid of it here. And they end up in one of those bins that I showed you that was going to go over applesauce.
Oh, okay. So there's a culling process all along the line.
All along the line. Although this is the main one. Then you can see behind us. These apples are all.
Let's sneak around here and let Calvin get over there. Go ahead.
These apples are. This is what we call in kind of our packing operation the bagging line. These are the apples that you see in the grocery store that are packed in 3-pound bags. You see there, most of the places that pack apples do this mechanically. We don't do it mechanically because the McIntosh apple tends to bruise easily, and anything that's mechanical from a bagging standpoint tends to be a little rougher on the apples. So we do it by hand. You see the girls fill the 3-pound bag, they put them in a box, walled partitioned box, and they're sent down the track to ultimately be sealed and palletized to, again, be sent to market.
It's kind of amazing. You have at least about 10 people on this line alone. I'm looking all the way down through.
Right, but what's happened is this line has built up supply. Actually, what really happened is I'm trying to make more bags today for an order I have for a guy who's going to be here mid-afternoon. So we're putting some apples on that line that we normally wouldn't. So that line has built up, and she has to stop the machine to clean that bagging line off. If you notice, she'll start it back up here in a couple minutes. So the girls that are bagging are going to ultimately be at the other end of the machine here in a minute.
It's a 3-pound bag, so they know when it's full. It's roughly 3 pounds.
Generally, we count the apples. You're supposed to weigh the apples, but usually what we end up doing is counting them. And we generally tend to put quite a bit more than 3 pounds in them.
And the apples are a little bigger this year, so maybe you don't get quite as many in a 3-pound bag.
I guess so, but most of the time people think of a 3-pound bag from a weight standpoint versus the number of apples. I don't know which is right, but you're right. The bigger the apple, the fewer in the bag.
Well, the people are getting their money's worth, that's for sure. Right?
Yes, that's what we find, that if you give people their money's worth, they tend to come back. And in our business, that's what we want.
They better come back.
Yep.
For lo these many years.
They're continuing to cull them here. They're putting some up in that top belt up there, right?
Well, apparently they'll find one that isn't quite right, huh?
Well, that's what happens. Ultimately, it gets by this person here, and if it's not right, it goes in that white chute, the white tube, onto a belt, which ultimately takes them back around, and they end up in that cider bin again.
Unbelievable. And it's been done roughly this way for how long, Peter?
Well, this machine has only been in place for about 6 years. Prior to that, it was done a completely different way. There was no mechanization to it at all. It was all by hand.
You gotta be kidding!
No, it was all. We had to come up the curve and put this machine in for a variety of reasons. One, I'll show you in a couple minutes.
If you're going to crank out that many apples over a season, you better be able to do it efficiently.
That's right, or you won't be around for very long.
All right, where are we going next?
Right down.
All right, let's do it. Yeah, we mentioned showed the brushes inside, but then as we're walking by outside, we noticed that the apples are being dipped in here. What's going on here, Pete?
This is where, again, we're back in the dumping area. This is where the process all starts. In that, they come out of the big bin that you see in front of us, and there is a flume of water that is bringing the apples out of the bin as they float to the surface. It's bringing them around, and there's an elevator chain that takes them into that set of brushes that Calvin showed us, or that I showed Calvin earlier. We just missed one bin being dumped, but if we wait here for just a second, we'll see how the process works from a mechanical standpoint. There are 2 bins up top that are the next 2 in line to be dipped. This really, in the apple arena, is a very archaic way of doing this process. I mean, we do it this way simply because we don't do quite enough volume to do it the more mechanized way, which is basically where all the forklift ever does is put the bin on a conveyor, and then it's all automatic after that.
Do you think it'll actually change at some point, or do you think it'll continue?
Depends on the volume. If we were to increase our volume by 40 or 50%, we would probably have to go to the other way. But we're right now kind of in that gray area where we can still do it this way, and I think it probably makes the most sense.
It's hard for me to believe that you could increase the volume after this year. You've had a lot of apples.
Right, but again, that's the amount of apples that we grew and picked. It's not necessarily the amount of apples that we're ultimately going to pack. I mean, should we want to pack more apples, we would really have, this process that you see would have to be going a lot faster than it is. I mean, right now we have one man who does it all by hand. I mean, there is some mechanization, but it's a pretty slow, arduous task. If you had to pick it up by 50%, you would have to mechanize it more than we do.
You know, I just seeing all these apples and watching the apples go by, I can just picture all those people who've, watching this program in the afternoon or in the evening on their local cable system, just being tantalized to the point where they got to go to the refrigerator and get a Macintosh, and that's not a bad idea either, is it?
No, that's a great idea, actually. Maybe we can show this right, what do we want it, before or after dinner time, one or the other, so that they all go and taste the product.
I see what's happening
now.
now.
What's happening?
Yep.
That bin was submerged in water. The apples floated out, and he's placing the next bin on the platform that takes them down into the water. See, there's a little bit of trickery to it all, but I mean, this fellow's done it for quite a while.
Yep.
The bin is secured on that platform, and then it's dunked, if you will.
The apples come out of the. Let me walk over this way a little bit.
The apples come out of that bin due to the stream of water. There's a pump. There's a pump that pushes the apples around.
That's incredible.
See how they come out? And it's gentle. You see, you need
it is gentle.
Everything with a Macintosh has to be as gentle as possible. The Macintosh apple is a very thin-skinned apple. In fact, one of the reasons for its popularity is because the skin is as thick as it is. Excuse me, the skin is as thin as it is. Most of the apples that are the newer varieties of today, especially the ones grown in the West, have a very thick skin. Of course, it's easier to handle apples with a thick skin. Hard, thick-skinned apples are apples that are much, much, much easier to handle than a Macintosh.
Every different variety has its own characteristics.
Absolutely. But they aren't developing any new thin-skinned apples. This is the only one there is left.
I love it. The Macintosh has been a popular variety for a long, long time.
It has, and of course that's what keeps us all in business. There have been a host of different varieties that have died away, and you couldn't sell any. Certainly not as many as we grow at Macintosh. And again, I think everyone locally probably has heard the story that that's what keeps the apple business in North Country going. We have the variety that everybody else has a hard time growing. So as long as its popularity continues, and we certainly hope it will, the Macintosh apple business will stay alive.
It's kind of amazing when you stop to think about it. You mentioned a few minutes ago how we tend to take some things for granted when we see them and work with them every day. But the name Macintosh has become synonymous with good apples, not just here in Clinton County in northern New York, but worldwide. And it's got quite an image to uphold, and it manages to do it well every year.
Yeah, it does. I'll tell you an interesting little story. We work as closely as we can with the New York Apple Association, and their mission in life is to promote New York apples. Well, one of the recent programs that they have instituted is at the end of the New York City Marathon. There are 40 or 50 bushels of apples that we provide for them, and they give all of the runners. Yeah,
they just had the New York City Marathon as we're recording this, and on what is this, the 3rd day of November 2003. Yeah. So it's very timely that you should mention that.
That's why I
should have known that there'd be a few boxes of apples there.
Well, Macintosh in particular. Now, New York City is a very big market for us, and the Macintosh
big market for everybody.
Yeah.
Big Apple.
Yeah,
Big Apple.
Big Apple, and home of the Mac, and so forth and so on. And it's just another marketing method that they came up with, which is great. I mean, we are the official apple of the New York City Marathon.
I've watched this orchard and the other orchards here in the North Country for well over 40 years. And I can remember so many associations that this Macintosh apple has had with successful campaigns that are and our street drives back in the 1960s before you were, I don't know.
I was around, but I wasn't worried about Macintosh apples.
We had a drive called Apples for Cystic Fibrosis. And every person, we're talking thousands and thousands of people, every person who made a $1 donation or more got a bag of apples.
Wow.
So it was good for cystic fibrosis sufferers, and it was good for the apple business. And it seems to me like every time a dignitary comes to town, he goes home with a bag or a box of apples, and that's a good little marketing thing too.
Sure. We try all we, I mean, the local trade or the local people really have been very supportive of the Macintosh and the other varieties as well, but mainly the Macintosh, and we're appreciative of it. And you know, we try to get as much notoriety as we can with whoever happens to be coming through town, be it, you know, the governor or Hillary Clinton or whoever happens to be coming through. We make sure they leave with a box of Macintosh apples.
Not a bad idea.
It's only good business, right?
You got it. All right. Now we'll move on to where we were going before.
Yeah, let's just keep moving here and I'll show you how the packing process works.
All right, let's do it. All right, we're on top of the world here. What are we looking at?
Well, we're up in the perch of the grading process where we have a person stay continually to basically run the machine and control the flow of the apples is what her main function is, and deploy the people accordingly. You're about to see the apples that have already come over a couple sets of brushes. They have come through a drying tunnel, so though they were dunked in water, they're now all dry. They are going to be put on a conveyor. You see, they're singulated, they call it, and they end up ultimately on what is called the sizer. Now the sizer are those blue, they ultimately are cups, but it looks like a blue chain of sorts. The fruit each individually comes down, is weighed right underneath where Calvin's standing. There is a set of scales. So each apple is weighed. Then as it proceeds down the cups.
Is something put on them here?
Yeah, well, let me.
Okay.
What happens is as they go down the cup, they ultimately, according to what their weight is, end up on whatever table is designed for that weight. What happens here is there are 3 banks of labels. Now, the label is the much discussed, generally, thought of as a pain in the butt because everybody has to peel them off. Well, believe me, there's no reason that we want to put a label on the apple, except the chain store insists on them being labeled so that they have that little number so that when you take it to the checkout person, that person from the number knows what it is and charges you accordingly. What happens is the computer within the grader tells which labeler to label which apples. In other words, the 100 size apples is labeled by the first one. The second bank are all the export apples. And the last bank are the bigger apples that are generally end up, they're an 80 size apple, which is kind of a more thought of as a cooking size than an eating size. But, it kind of seems like a shooting gallery of sorts
really
in the
neat.
noise, but that's the process. There's a bellows that blow with air the sticker on the apple.
Oh, okay.
Now that's on a roller, so hold on.
I got it.
You gotta keep your Okay, now we are watching the actual packing process. Now, if you look at, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 6 tables on each side. Generally, what we do is the smaller fruit are on the first few tables, and then it becomes gradually bigger. If you notice, the woman right here on the second table in the, just putting the ticket on the box, those apples will be going overseas. Those are a medium-sized apple that, if you see the size of the box, the Europeans are very into this box that goes right on the shelf.
Ah.
Okay, so it comes off the pallet. It's put on the little cart that the grocer uses to get the product to the shelf, and they take that entire box and put it right on the shelf. In America, we don't do it that way yet. We take a box like, I don't know if Calvin can see the box she's blocking right there. It's a much bigger box, and it ends up, the grocer takes the box to the shelf and empties the apples out of the box on the shelf.
Oh, okay.
There's a big difference when you're talking about a real perishable product like ours. I mean, we would much prefer to have that box go right on the shelf so that the fruit is only handled once. Versus,
you think that'll happen?
Well, if you adhere to the philosophy that we ultimately end up doing what all Europeans have done, which, you know, in fashion and so forth, I think it will ultimately happen. It would certainly seem like it would be a labor saver to me within the chain store, but you'll be amazed how many chain store buyers say, no way, no interest, not going to do it that way. There is a little saying in the U.S. chain store arena: pile them high and watch them fly.
Isn't that amazing?
If you think about chain stores and you think about seeing citrus or seeing apples, what do they always have them? In a big pile, right?
Sure.
And ultimately you want the one that's on the bottom of the pile, you pull it out and the whole thing falls over.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is not the best way, we don't think, to handle Macintosh apples. Again, the European just puts the whole shelf, or the whole box on the shelf. So there's no big pile. You can choose to take what you want. He'll take that little blue partition out, and you'll end up with just a layer of apples that you can choose from.
I love it. You know, I forgot to ask you, how big are your cold storage facilities back there? How many boxes can you handle at one time?
Well, each room, I mean, they vary a little in size from about 10,000 bushels up to 30,000 bushels. Most of the rooms are the 20,000 bushel variety.
How many rooms?
We have 14 rooms at this facility. We do have another facility that has 4 or 5 rooms at it as well. Generally, it takes us about a week to 2 to pack out a 20,000 bushel room. So what happens is you keep the fruit as fresh as you possibly can. You know, once we're done one room, we open the next one and we work our way through it, you know, until mid-June, 1st of July. That's where the whole controlled atmosphere concept comes in.
So what happens when you can't store them, like this year?
Well, there are a variety of different things you can do with them. None of them make any economic sense because the crop is so big that there's just nowhere to go with them. You can't store them anywhere else because everybody else is full. I mean, ultimately, you end up sending some of them to the processing plant that you may not have wanted to do. But if you can't store them, I mean, they really aren't any good to you.
But will you be able to get rid of all the apples you picked this year?
Oh, we will. It's going to be a task, but we'll get rid of them. Well, I mean, this process will go on longer than it normally would in a quote, normal year. But, the beauty of this year is the quality of the fruit is fabulous.
Everybody is saying that.
So, that helps. I mean, it would be terrible to have a huge crop of, hail and, dirty fruit, as they call it. This year we have just the opposite. This is as nice a crop as I've ever seen. So, we need to let the glut of the market kind of get over with and have it move through the system. And believe me, I'm working every day at it.
I bet you are. Are there any plans to either enlarge this facility or build another one to keep up with it if you have a big crop next year?
No, there really aren't. Not right at the moment. I mean, we've got kind of all we can handle right at the moment.
It's impossible to predict. You didn't know last year this time that you're going to have this many apples?
No, we didn't. And it becomes a real guessing game. When you sit around the month of August and see those storm clouds, and in July, and you see those storm clouds develop to the west, not knowing what's going to come out of them. I mean, this year, all we ever had was rain. The year before and the year before, a lot of them developed some hailstorms. I I mean, if you have a hailstorm and any of these blocks of orchards, you know, you can have a crop that can go up or down 25 to 50% in 10 minutes.
And we've seen it happen so
Sure.
many times in the past. I don't know if Forrence Orchards has had a shining globe over their heads over the years, but it seems to me like you've been hit less with hail than some of the other folks we've talked to.
Well, I don't know, we've had our share of hail, don't get me wrong, but you're right, there are some apple growers locally who seem, for whatever the reason, to get hit more than we have.
Wrong place at the wrong time, I
Well, I'll tell you, Gordy, you don't even like to talk about it, is what
No,
it comes
it's
down
awful.
to. You almost kind of block it out of your mind and try not to, you know, get into all that karma stuff. It's just something we hope doesn't happen, but we're well aware that it's going to any given year. And you kind of have to be prepared to deal with it accordingly. I mean, it's just part of the business.
You know, I don't know if you're as much at the mercy of the weather as, for example, people who make maple syrup. But I mean, we've seen so many devastating things happen to them. The ice storm was terrible for most people with maple trees. But this business is still tremendously affected by meteorological things, isn't it?
Oh, it is. I mean, starting right from the beginning with the pollination process. I mean, if by chance, well, first you have the bloom, which may or may not be frozen with, you know, hit with frost, which all comes down to the temperature, you know, mid any given day or night generally. That can, you know, frost, it can freeze the buds. Then you have the pollination time where the bees are in the orchard, and you know, if you have a week of rain, that kills you. You know, then you have hail, then you have the droughts. I mean, it's agriculture. That's what you have to deal with. I mean, you have to be prepared to deal with those problems. If you aren't, you're going to be in big trouble because it's part of the business. You know, there are now insurance policies that you can buy that are designed to deal with natural disasters like that, but they're expensive. You know, and you know, it becomes a gamble every day.
A juggling match, but that's what life is all about.
Exactly.
I can see why apple growers, like anybody else who works outside, it behooves them to be a little religious because you might be on your knees on a given day.
Well, the big local joke that, you know, you don't hear as much as I do, but there's always something wrong with the crop or the weather or whatever.
Sure.
Apple growers are constantly complaining or worried or whatever, and you know, it gets to be a little tiresome for those who aren't involved or don't know much about it. But the reality is that's the saga of the business. There's always something that we are kind of worried about or scared could happen or, you know, whatever.
You know, when you were saying that, an image popped into my mind of the late Barry Brannon, who coached football at St. John's for years and years. At the beginning of the season, Barry Brannon would do interviews on the radio and say, I don't know, Gordy. I got a bunch of little kids this year. I don't have anybody back. You know, they're not as fast as they should be. And then he'd go out there and for the first 5 games, he'd kick everybody's butt in the North Country. The way you were saying that about apple growers, bless his wonderful memory. I saw Barry Brannon's face in my mind's eye.
Well,
but there's always something to talk about.
That's right. I mean, it really is a business.
And it's 10 o'clock and everything is stopped, and there's a reason for that.
Everything shuts down for 10 minutes at 10 o'clock and at 2 o'clock for a break, where everybody kind of gets a chance to sit down and have something to drink or whatever they choose to do.
It's pretty busy business for these people. I've been watching those hand.
How long can people work that fast? I got tired just watching them.
My goodness.
Packing apples is an extremely arduous task. I mean, you're on your feet the whole time. You know, you're making decisions of the quality. What we didn't get into is these packers make 3 decisions when they pick an apple up. It's either a cider apple or a processing apple, which goes along this top belt.
Yes.
Back to what we talked about before, the processing bin. The apple goes in what we call to be a second pack, which is a box that has mildly bruised, blemished, whatever apple in it. Those apples would probably go to some sort of institution a jail, a school, or something like that. Perfectly fine apples,
Sure.
but they aren't the best. Or they would go into the best box, which is really what we need to have as many of as we possibly can. Those apples would go to a chain store or something that wants the best, so to speak. So as they pick the apples up, I mean, there's some decision. It's not just packing them off a belt that there's no decision making. I mean, they are constantly concentrating on the quality of the fruit because we have quality control people who get around and make sure that, in fact, as best we can, the fruit ends up in the right box.
And that would be very difficult to automate that part of it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's why there's really, as much as we live in an age of automation and technology and so forth and so on, there continues to be a human element in the packing process of apples that I don't think will be replicated. To the unassuming eye, they kind of all look the same. But to these packers, there really is, they speak to me any given day about the fruit's running good today or the fruit's not running as good today.
That's amazing. Everybody's got shop talk, don't they?
Yes,
huh?
oh sure, we've got plenty of it here.
The nomenclature that fits the job, the phrases that I'm sure that we wouldn't even mention. Do you ever get a chance to visit other packers around the state to see if there's any little thing you can learn about this operation? Or?
Sure. Well, we try as much as we can to get out and visit others, but part of the process is when you're out and away looking at other people's places, you're not home tending to business. But yes, we do get out and visit some of the other places. Western New York has a lot of very large packing houses. There are little nuances and so forth for each packing house that you try to learn something from. The distinction we have here and generally in the Champlain Valley is we really, for all practical purposes, only pack one variety. We, again, have a few Cortlands and maybe a few Red Delicious and a few Empires, but 90% of what we pack are Macintosh. When you go to a packing house in Western New York, they might pack Red Delicious for an hour or two, and then they might pack Empires, and then they might pack whatever variety. It's not as simple as ours is. They have all the different packaging, which we don't have. We have a little of, but nothing like them. What happens is a chain store orders a truckload of apples. He'll order 5 different varieties on that truck. In the old days, a chain store would order a load of Macintosh, a load of Cortlands, a load of Red Delicious. Not anymore. Now they want all the different varieties. They want them delivered more often, so that in theory the fruit is fresher. So that's one of the reasons we have a hard time dealing directly with chain stores, is because we don't have all the different varieties that they want. We have the Macs and the Cortlands, and that's kind of the bulk, soon to be Honeycrisp, we hope, the bulk of what we can provide. That's why we have to go with a fruit somewhere that can distribute, can dovetail us into one of those trucks that has 4 or 5 different varieties on it.
How much under the gun are you in terms of the pressure of time? You mentioned you have an order that you have to get out because the truck's going to be in here. Is that a daily thing or what?
Yeah, pretty much. We generally ship anywhere from 1 to 6 trucks out of here a day. Trailer trucks, the kind you see on the Northway.
Yes.
So, again, it depends on what the demand is, who wants what we have available. There's a whole equation that every day when you come in, and usually what happens is on Monday you can get some sense going forward, and again, a lot of it comes down to what is the chain store featuring on any given week. Do they want bags? Do they want what we call cells? Then there's the European demand, which varies somewhat as well. So it tends to be tricky to keep it all together so that you don't end up with an oversupply of any particular size or grade. That's the objective in life, is to not end up, because you want the fruit to be as fresh as it possibly can to get to the chain store or to get to the distributor.
Do you also have a retail business here?
We do, actually. In fact, it's right out. You can kind of see it from the back side here, where we offer a few varieties that we grow, and we find that local people or not just local people, but we find that people tend to want to buy the fruit as close to the point of origin as they can. I mean, I think of it in my mind as like a factory discount place where you go, and in essence, we generally offer the fruit at just about the same price we're offering it to the wholesale people.
Oh, no kidding.
Right. I mean, it's really cheap relative to what you would have to pay at the local grocery store. I mean, it's ridiculously cheap to that point. I would argue to you the local grocery store is charging too much. Hence, if they were charging less, the volume would be higher, and I could sell them more apples. But I mean,
that's a battle you're not likely to win.
No. I have no control over what they do, really. So we have always had a little store that provides whatever mix of fruit people want, and we have people come back for years and years and years, and it's amazing how many people come that are leaving the area on a trip. We're going to South Carolina, we're going to North Carolina, we're going to Florida, we're going to Michigan.
Huh?
Yeah, exactly. And they take apples to the people who have relocated away and say, look, bring me some of your apples. Bring me some McIntosh apples. So they come here and we get them whatever they need to put in the back of their car and head out with.
I wish I had $1 for every box of apples I've shipped to people around the world for various occasions. Because it's the name McIntosh is synonymous with who we are here.
That's right. It absolutely is, and we want to keep it that way.
Oh yeah, I like that idea. Well, we've certainly had a good cross-section. Shall we walk out front now?
Let's go.
Calvin.
Just a couple questions. Is there some indication as to which individual packed the box so you can keep track of your employees?
Yeah. If you notice when they're packing, the one of the written rules, not unwritten, written rules are you have to put your number on the box before or after. It doesn't matter. As long as when the apples are on that track, they have a number on them. That's all we really ask. And then if we find any problems, we'll know who to come back to correct. It's pivotal.
Yeah. And my other question is, tell us again how this blue conveyor here knows what size an apple is to kick it off.
Let's see. I can best show you. If you step back on there. In fact, maybe this is what the apple ultimately rides on. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, this is on a chain, a conveyor chain, and what happens is there is a solenoid that fires. It hits this pin that forces the cup up. The cup raises, ejects the apple, and lands here, ends up in that chute on a cross delivery belt and on that table.
But how does it know the size?
It's all computerized because it goes across the scale, which was right under where you were first standing. There's a scale there, so you can't see it from here. The scale tells the computer the size. Each cup is numbered in the computer. So literally, when an apple hits that cup, the computer knows what cup it is, knows its size from the scale, and knows, and we tell it on the, the operator tells it where to put that apple. So, any apple that goes over that scale, we know, we can tell her where to go.
Thousands and thousands of apples.
It really is a little tricky. I mean, it's quite a machine. Although when you kind of see it operate, it almost looks a little archaic. But
Not to me. It looks cutting edge to me, baby.
It's a little tricky to keep it all going, I must say. I mean, if one little thing is out of whack, watch out.
Really? You got a whole bad run.
Yeah,
huh?
you can end up with a massive headache. We keep it up, and we try to keep it operating the way it's supposed to, which is the key to the whole thing. We have technicians come in and service the machine. Oh yeah.
How long, for example, has this machine been here?
6 years.
Sounds like a lot of things
6 or 7
happened just
years.
before you came back here, buddy boy.
Actually, that was part of my arrival, was to make sure this thing would work, put it in, and make sure we could make it work. Listening to it can be a little trying all day long, but you get used to it. if you notice, most of the girls have headsets on. We offer hearing protection. Not that it's that loud in here, because it really isn't, but we offer hearing protection to everybody who works in here, and most of them don't use it, but some of them use radios as an alternative, to kind of break the monotony a little bit.
I'm not sure, Peter, that you don't have about 15 or 20% apple juice in your veins after all these years.
Maybe my father does, but I don't have it yet.
I don't know. It seems to me like you're eating and sleeping and breathing the apple business. I think you have to.
Well, listen, it's an interesting business. It's your roots. They talk about all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
I mean, it was something I grew up around. I went to Peru High School, so I've learned a lot more about it since I've been back. But it's an interesting business. I enjoy it. I mean, it becomes trying sometimes, but what business doesn't, right?
They all do.
I mean, there isn't a business that I know of yet that's easy, that makes money.
I'm glad he added that little addendum on there. All right, let's move on. We're out in the little store that we alluded to a few minutes ago, and I see a paraphrase for the old line, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, an apple a day is the healthy way, the Honeycrisp.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where people can come in and buy some honey, buy some apples. Can they ship them here?
Yes. In fact, let me show you. These apples, we have 3 different sizes that we offer. This is 15 apples that is being shipped, I'm not sure where, but we ship on Mondays generally because they go UPS ground, and it gives you the most number of days for the product to get where it's going. What you don't want with this product is for it to go and sit over the weekend. So this is the shipment that's going out today.
They're well packed in styrofoam.
Yeah, they're packed in styrofoam. We put a little simulated green grass in there, and we put a note. And it's a business we've been in for a while, and we find that people want to be able to send a little taste to the North Country, to their relatives or whoever, as Christmas gifts, Thanksgiving gifts. It's not a huge business for us, but we enjoy doing it, and we think that we have a lot of repeat customers, which I think is all you really need to know.
Goodwill is not a bad thing in
Right.
any business.
Right. Yep. So I will say to you, though, that as relative to the price of apples out here, it's not cheap.
You do the best you can with every phase of the business, and obviously you have for a long, long time. Before we leave you here today on this, what did I say, 3rd day of November 2003 at Forrence Orchards on Route 22, south of Peru, I want to just give all the family members that are working with this operation a little plug here. We've mentioned a few, we've interviewed a few. Just go down through the lineup to let people know that this is truly a North Country family operation.
Right. Well, you talked to Roger earlier. Roger is kind of the founding father after my grandfather, who passed away. And Roger had 2 brothers, Bill and Virgil. Virgil passed away a few years ago. The 3 of them ran and expanded the business to a certain extent. And then Roger's son Mason and his son Mac, who have been in the business since they graduated from Cornell, I'm going to say 1975, so 30-odd years, they have been integral parts of expanding the business. Now, Virgil's son, Cortland, also was integral in the business for quite a few years. He's recently decided that he's going to go another direction, so he's no longer in the apple business, but he was a valuable contributor, and I'm kind of the last guy in. I've only been here 5 or 6 years, and I've kind of taken over where my father left off in the storage and packing of the product.
How about the distaff side, the ladies? There are lady
yeah.
family members whom I've seen
Yes,
pulling their weight.
In fact, Joan right now is working. Is intricately involved. Joan Forrence is Mason's wife. She's intricately involved in the harvesting process and a bunch of other kind of detail work, as well as she helps us immensely on the gift carton business. So she's intricately involved in a host of different facets of the business. And that's about it for the wives. The rest are kind of off in other arenas.
But they all support it.
Is that the only next generation? Is that the only next generation?
I haven't gotten to the next generation.
Oh.
We all have youth behind us that may or may not someday get into business. But Mason has a son, Seth, who just recently graduated from Cornell 3 or 4 years ago, and he's too is intricately involved in the business. So he really is kind of the youth that we look toward to kind of keep it all going. And he's a hard charger.
You're going to have to offer him a bonus or he's going to get traded out of here. It's very hard. We've done so many programs supporting agriculture here in the North Country, and it just breaks my heart every time one of the family farms is sold off. And that's because young kids today are not stupid. They know how to add 2 and 2, and in agriculture, sometimes it doesn't add up to 4.
Right.
I don't know if that's true in the apple business, but I imagine sometimes you have to do a little convincing to get the younger generation to stick around.
Right. I mean, you're getting into areas that are a little tricky, but the fact of the matter is you either want to do it or you don't. It's not a convincing. I mean, you can't convince people to get involved in a business that they may or may not really want to be involved in. I think you just let the natural progression take over. I mean, I wasn't involved in it for years. Always thought that I would get involved someday in it, and so have since. But after that, I mean, I think that everyone has to make their own decisions. I will say, as much as people don't like to hear it, that the apple business is really a tough go from both the standpoint of the work quotient, but also the fact that you're so subject to these swings and all the various government involvement. I mean, we have a tremendous amount of government involvement in our business, and also these markets. I mean, food is a product that people, from an inflation component index, want down, not up. Food prices are something that, logically you want to feed people cheaply, right? I mean, people don't want food to be expensive. But consequently, you're in a situation where you're kind of fighting that a little bit. I mean, it's hard to get what you need to cover the expense side of the equation, because the expenses just continue to go up year after year after year. And I mean, it's not unique to apples. It's absolutely just an agricultural issue. And as your expenses go up, well, you've really got to be able to get more for the product, or you're going to be in trouble. It's just a matter of time.
Well, now to just recapitulate, we should say that we've covered just about every phase of this business, inside and out, in 2 chapters. Mm-hmm. We never say no, so there could be a 3rd chapter someday. We'll just see what happens next year. But I thank you very much, Peter, on behalf of the rest of your family and all the wonderful Jamaican workers that come back year after year. We learn so much about their ways of life and how they bring things back home with them, like refrigerators and television sets. Yeah. The local people who have worked for you, all your family members, and the general population here in Clinton County and the North Country, which have supported this business and the apple business in general for generations now. It's a big package, and obviously it's one that's worked very well. Thank you for moving back to town and for inviting us out here today and picking your brain. I think we not quite picked it clean, but I think we did a pretty good job on it.
Sometimes I don't think there's much there, but well, we'd like to thank you. I mean, we appreciate your comments, and we just thank you for taking the time to come around, and we show you as best we know how what happens here. And you were absolutely right that it's a big operation that has to integrate with the local town, county, state, and so forth. And we appreciate people's help, and we appreciate them kind of putting up with all the different agricultural issues that come around, from a sprayer that's loud early in the morning, or wind machines that are blowing in the middle of the night, or vehicles that run on the road not as fast as cars and you have to be careful of. I mean, there's a lot of little things that may be an inconvenience to some, but we appreciate people cooperating and allowing us to do it, and hopefully we can keep doing it.
For a long time to come, we hope. That's the way it is at Forrence Orchards on Route 22 south of Peru. And who knows where we're going to be next time for our little corner.